I'm really excited to be here. I have about 25 years experience working in the creative industries. And I have to tell you straight up, because I want to get my excitement out right away, this is the most exciting time to be a creative. Because the way the world is going and the changes that are happening, leveraging your creative intelligence is going to give you such, I guess, market value for all industries, not just within the creative industries. So I really hope by the end of this talk you'll really invest in yourself to see how many ways that you can actually bring value to your customers, but also use your creative, natural creative sensibilities, but also look at getting training and how you can actually help other industries and make a better world for all of us. So let's see how we go. Well, we don't know exactly where the world of work will look like tomorrow. One of the things we do know from research that just came out last year was that 40% of the Australian workforce will be out of a job in 10 to 15 years due to computers. Now, you might think, oh, that's fine, I'm really good at computers. But that's not the end of the story. A book that also came out last year, which I really encourage any professional to get, is The Future of Professions. Richard Susskind wrote a book several years ago called The End of Lawyers. And to be honest, the law faculties and the law firms actually didn't pay attention. But now he's written this book with his son. And it questions the relevance of every profession in the 21st century. Lawyers, doctors, accountants, any expert that has taken years to gather that information. Now a lot of that information is on the internet. And the future of these professions is really incredibly at question. So there's another area where a lot of these professional organizations are going to have to redesign the way they run their companies. They're going to have to redesign as much as the music industry had to redesign after Apple came through. So we've been through a lot of changes over the years. Henry Ford's assembly line revolutionized manufacturing. And it had some amazing creative parts of it. It was genius. You know, they were able to just push stuff out. They were able to have people with very little knowledge, very little creative intelligence, actually do a capable job, and it was repeated. Now, this influence is still with us today, of course, but it influenced the way we have strategies, the way we use business plans. Everything's strategy and process driven. But we really have to stop thinking that way, or at least add some other tools to our toolkit, because life is changing so fast and it's not at all predictable like an assembly line. So creativity has always been at the heart of business. And I really want to stress that creativity is not just the creative industries, and that we need to have this marriage between design and business, design and the health sector, and all of them sit under the umbrella of technology. So what spurs creativity? So Vince mentioned that I'm a New Yorker, and it's true, and I don't have quite the Queen's accent that I used to, but I might just say, forget about it once in a while. But I had a really lucky early experience. I studied film at NYU, and then I was studying at Pratt Institute, but I was always restless, and I always wanted to travel. But I had this job that I just couldn't resist. And the person I worked for has had a huge influence on me, although at the time I didn't really appreciate it. And one of the things I really want to stress too when it comes to creativity is the future of every business depends on you as managers managing for creativity. Not just managing the people, but managing for creativity and creating that dynamic environment where everyone feels that they have a say, that they can contribute, that they can have a lot of fun, and they also can actually break the rules to innovate. So I worked for Lorne Michaels. Lorne Michaels is the executive producer. You would know him from Saturday Night Live. He also has a company called Broadway Video. And when I started at the company, they're still there. They're in this building called the Brill Building. Does anyone know the Brill Building? Okay. The Brill Building is one of the most iconic creative industry buildings in America. It's where hundreds of hit songs were written in the 60s and in the 50s. Carole King used to have an office there. Neil Sedaka had an office there. And when I started working there, they were actually renovating and taking out all this beautiful mission furniture and putting in open plans and putting in video machines and post-production facilities. But Lorne Michaels started Saturday Night Live, and he was quite a radical Canadian comedian writer. And he worked for Laugh-In, and he worked for quite a few early stage comedians. But he was pretty restless, and he wanted to do something that was a little bit more political. And so when he started his first show, and you'll recognize some of the people in there, the name of this troupe, which I think is fantastic for today, was the Not Ready for Prime Time troupe, something like that. They just were never going to be ready for prime time. So Saturday Night Live airs at 11:30 in the evening. So they get to do a lot of things that most television shows don't get away with. But one of the fascinating things that I think any startup as well can take from the learnings of live television is that they don't go on when they're ready. They go on because it's 11:30. And they have exactly a week to put together that show. And literally people are working till 5 in the morning and they're back again at 10 in the morning every single day. And they might produce almost like 40 different skits, and they'll narrow it down to 8. So it's a pretty tense creative environment. So how does somebody actually create that environment and actually get to air on time? And to some extent, the creative leadership that's there is that people are allowed to really play. They're allowed to come up with any idea, but then halfway through the week, they actually have to start editing. And it's a group decision on the whole. But in the end, the executive producer actually makes the call. And again, with creative leadership, you need to give people that space to get those ideas out, and a lot of ideas, as many ideas as fast as possible, so that you can actually edit down to those real gems. But creatives, as probably you all know, also need a lot of structure, and they need boundaries. So that's really important as well. So from an academic point of view, and just to lead into some of the work that UTS is doing in this space, a lot of research has gone into where creativity comes from, and I'm sure you've read heaps yourself. But one of the studies is that creative intelligence and analytical intelligence and practical intelligence are 3 different parts that our brain can tap into. And not everyone is going to have a strength in each part, but you want those 3 different areas in your teams so that they can actually bounce ideas off each other. So if you're forming teams in the creative industries, you have to look really closely at the makeup and personalities of the people in it. And there's some research that just came out a few weeks ago out of QUT that talked about extroverts and introverts in the creative industries. And I don't know if you've seen this, but they said the extroverts love doing the mind mapping, the design thinking. They love their Post-it notes. They're out there. But the introverts don't actually like that process. They like more meditation. They actually like a quiet environment. And they actually need to be helped to relax to get their ideas out. Now, it's not to say that extroverts are better at being designers or being creative, because introverts have a lot to offer. But how often do we give the introverts that space to actually express themselves? Never. Okay, so this is a book that I quite enjoy, and I encourage you to have a look at this one. Creative Intelligence by Bruce Nussbaum. He's a professor at Parsons School of Design, and he has talked about how every business, he was a Business Week journalist, and he was one of the first journalists to actually talk about design thinking. And you can blame him for all these business consultants using design thinking, and they're not designers. So he breaks it down into knowledge mining, framing, playing, making, and pivoting. Now, of course, he also stresses that this sits on the framework of design thinking. So we're not replacing design thinking, but it's just another way of looking at it, and also maybe going a little bit deeper in some ways. So by knowledge mining, a lot of you probably know, but I like to think of knowledge mining as bird watching. So for you to be able to see a trend coming, you really need to know your landscape. You need to know everything in that landscape. So if you have a bird's eye view, you want to get down close and you want to really understand your customer, understand their values, and try to find any patterns that you can. Because that's really important, because it's in those small little snapshots that you're actually going to get some insight that could possibly make your solution to their problem a lot more effective. The other aspect is framing. Now, framing's quite a big element, of course, in design thinking, but a lot of professionals, a lot of leaders or CEOs don't actually go deep enough into what are the causes of some of the problems that an organization might be having. And I'll talk about framing in depth a little bit more. So as Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I know one of the girls here that works at Frost has a background in anthropology. And when I was going to uni, anthropology, there was no future in anthropology. But now anthropology is actually a really important skill set. So this whole idea of actually understanding people as intimate as an anthropologist would is something that you need to consider. And there's so many ways that you can actually put yourself in their shoes. One of the ways that I heard someone talking about the other day is when they see their clients, like after the first initial meeting, they always ask them, what has inspired you this week? What are you excited about? It's about getting into their personal space, not just about the job that has to be done. Because by asking them these personal questions, of course, you can find out a little bit more how to please them. So the other key element of creative intelligence, which I hope happens here all the time, is play. This is our data arena at UTS, and we had a future of storytelling lab where we had industry partners, we had faculty, we had random people who just decided to come, and we explored how is storytelling changing with all the media options that we have. And in this situation, you are able to change the visuals with a little gadget that you could hold. So one of the groups actually used the story of Where's Wally? And they broke down the story so that you actually had only these small circles, and it was much, much harder to find Wally. So we had about 20 people, and it was ridiculous. We couldn't get them out of the data arena. So it just shows that you could actually change the way you experience a story with a group of people, and you're all interactive, and you're using technology in quite a different way. It was fantastic. So to predict an idea is to have an idea. So where do ideas come from? Another book I would absolutely insist you read is Stephen Johnson's book, Where Ideas Come From, Where Good Ideas Come From. It's just magnificent, and he talks a lot of what we talked about already, but he also talks about the hunch, how to follow your instinct. How do you have a hunch and somebody in New York has the same idea? And how is it these inventions all happen seemingly at the same time? Because in this network society that we have, more so than ever, people are using different parts, I guess, of their sensibility, and they're picking up things in their landscape that are happening in other landscapes. So that hunch that you have is actually very much something that could be happening in another city, and you wonder how do they copy you? It's interesting. But I don't know how many people here are in the startup community, but I just wanted to throw out a few books that you should have a look at as well. Mainly Lean Startup really talked about simplifying the way you have a business. It's all about iteration. It's about pivoting. It's about prototyping really quickly, and not unlike how they act at Saturday Night Live. It's about intense, get your idea out there, don't finish it, don't perfect it, make it out of cardboard, go out onto the street and start asking some customers, would you use this? So at the hatchery, which is our incubator at UTS, we actually have boot camps for students just in design thinking and lean canvas and business model inc. And they go through 2 or 3 weeks of boot camps, and then they actually have to start practicing on some challenges that we give them. So it's a narrow mind which cannot look at a subject from various points of view, says George Eliot. So at UTS, we're actually looking at all different points of view, and we are particularly excited about innovation and creative intelligence. So the unit that I work for is fairly new, and we are non-faculty, but we work across the faculty. Our whole objective is to bring the ideas from industry, the ideas that are happening around the world, and really sort of, inspire and light some fires within the university to get them collaborating better with each other, to get students thinking more about how their skill set could be used in maybe other sectors, because there's no guarantee that what they're studying now is going to be something that they can use in the future solely. So one of the groups that UTS houses in this space where I am is the Designing Out Crime unit and the Design Innovation Center. Now, Case Dorst is one of our most esteemed professors, and I've just been told that he's actually the most cited reference for design thinking. So he has this book that came out last year on frame innovation, and I'm not even going to begin to go into it too detailed, but it is actually interesting, and they've kind of taken the whole idea of in-depth analysis and understanding your customers to another level. And I'm just going to give you some case studies. So the Designing Out Crime group are a bunch of design researchers, anthropologists, political science majors, and they have funding from the federal government, and they have been doing some amazing work both here and around the world. So they use Case's idea of frame creation, and it goes into similar things that design thinking exactly is. Archaeology, really looking at the problem, paradox, wondering what's stopping this problem from being solved. Why hasn't this problem been solved already? Who's stopping it? What's stopping it? Then looking at the context and going out in the field, and then transformation and integration. So I'll just give you some examples. This is Roger Watson, who leads the Designing Out Crime unit. So this initiative here, I don't know if you'll see it, they were approached by the New South Wales Justice Department because the New South Wales Justice Department wanted to make the process of being a victim easier, because we have a criminal justice process that actually favors the criminal. So if you're a victim of crime, you actually have to struggle through the system. You have to be present in a courtroom. You don't get a place to, the prisoner has a quiet place in his cell, and then he's brought in. The victim has to, is part of the crowd, has to stand there, has to get ready for this testimony, and doesn't really have any protection. So they spent several months with victims of crime, asking them how they felt the process was for them. And they also spoke to, the guards at the table, they spoke to the cafe owners, they spoke to the judges, they spoke to a lot of criminals as well. And so they really worked at how can we use our frame creation to come up with a seriously decent solution to this problem. And they asked over and over again, why is this problem not been solved already? So some of the solutions they came up with is they actually ensured that all victims have a meeting room or quiet room where they can actually get their thoughts together before they come into the courtroom. They also have a hotline so that they can get immediate help and support from a psychological point of view I don't know if this has all been implemented yet, but this was the idea. They've also created a special unit for victims who have property crime. So small shop owners who actually get their windows broken all the time. They're victims as well, and there was just no process for them to be looked after. And that actually became a big problem in the system as well. So they look very closely as, who are we doing this for? Who are we doing this with? And how are we showing them the way to change things? So the designing out crime is really about design as an approach to problem solving and looking deeply at what those problems are. So they go from a criminal justice system to actually a justice system for the victims of crime. And they did the same thing with the Western Australia prison. I know this all sounds pretty just crime related, but I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, this was the room where Indigenous prisoners were supposed to be rehabilitated to learn new skills, whether it was further education or getting a degree or just getting a certificate. This is where they had to work. And after the same similar process, the team at Designing Out Crime convinced Western Australia to actually work with the Indigenous prisoners to actually design the furniture. They had other prisoners in another unit actually design the buildings, and they completely re-landscaped the whole area. And the amazing thing is they've had something like 80% of the prisoners who actually had this beautiful environment to work in have actually stayed out of prison and have improved their lives through further education in some ways. So that's pretty phenomenal. That something as obvious to designers that this would be really important wasn't obvious to the prison sector. And these guys have written a book about all of their work, and just last week they carted out 2 gigantic boxes of the books because all the police officers in Western Australia, they're buying the book. They've got real buy-in here. And on Twitter, I noticed there's a Designing Out Crime unit that's related to the White House. So I actually tweeted about these guys on Twitter, and they never use Twitter because they're too busy doing good. But now I'm being followed by all these policemen. It's pretty spooky. So they've gone from teaching in prison to creating an education pathway. And that's pretty profound. And I'm really, I think we all have to be proud of what the power of design can do. And this is the power you all have. And I hope that, tomorrow you're going to start your next project and do something amazing. So I'll just go on a little bit about our center. So we are a group of about 10 people. We are new. We're surrounded by academics, but we're not academics, but we do have academics in our group. But we feel like we are a Trojan horse. We are busting down the doors of all these different faculties to try to get them to get out of their silo, to work together, to give students some breathing space, to collaborate with other students in other sectors, and to bring them all together so that they can share their skills and learn what it's like to collaborate. Because we all know collaboration is yet one of the other important skills that you need to be able to do to survive now. So our main goal is reimagining education. Wow, that's a pretty big goal. And we're pretty excited about it because we think that universities, just like the future of professions, universities also have to be careful what they're doing. And we want to be at the cutting edge. And UTS have really committed to using creative intelligence and innovation to help their students have a competitive edge. So one of the programs we're most proud of is called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. It's a co-degree that students can take as in addition to their domain expert degree. So you could do engineering and Bachelor of Intelligence. You can do fashion and Bachelor of intelligence, creative intelligence. 17 different disciplines are represented in this cohort of students. And this is their third year. So it's all very new for us. And next year is their final year. Now, up until now, they've only been taught in boot camps. So they have their normal degree. In summer school, winter school, they have intensive boot camps. And what's amazing about this degree is that the boot camps are actually taught by the different faculty. And they're the most passionate faculty members. And they come together, so these students learn how to solve problems from a microbiologist point of view, how to solve problems from an engineer's point of view, from a writer's point of view, from a poet's point of view. Basically, the students say that they had no idea what was going to come about from a creative intelligence and innovation course. And the reason why I wanted to share it with you is not to try to get you to take the course, because it's an undergraduate course. But the fascinating thing is, in the second cohort, they had something like over 400 students trying to get in. And I think even the students are just getting this idea that just having a degree in a certain domain that specializes in one area is not enough. And having a degree like this also shows us that we all need to be able to actually look at all these different sectors, like science and medical technology, and just think, how are the problems that they're solving similar to the problems that we want to solve, and actually talk to them and actually work with them, make them part of your team. So the other big project that we do is nurturing entrepreneurs. So downstairs in our building, we have 2 spaces that have only been going for about a year or so. One is the hatchery, and the other is Hatchery Plus. The hatchery is a pre-incubator. So students can apply to be part of it, and it's really just to help them understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur and put that seed of thinking like an entrepreneur. And Hatchery Plus are for students who actually want to run a business. And we've had 8 students come through, 8 companies come through in the last 3 months, and at least 2 of them are already getting funding, very close to getting funding. So it's frightening what these students are coming out with. And the whole idea is, we want our students, and I encourage you as well, to do whatever it takes to start thinking like an entrepreneur, thinking like a startup, and seeing how you're going to contribute to the company that you work for, and also to designing your career, designing your life. Because you're going to have to be able to iterate and change. And people in the startup community, they're incredibly passionate. They need help from everyone. It takes a whole village to create a vibrant startup community. And you'll be aware that this is a big deal for Australia at the moment with the ideas boom. But we all have a contribution to make. So I encourage you to sort of work with the design community and the startup community. I just read the other day, I think it was John Meader from Rhode Island School of Design, and he was predicting that the business schools that design schools are actually going to evolve into business schools. That the future of design schools is in a business faculty. I'll leave you with that thought. So every year we do special projects, and I mentioned it already, the future of storytelling. So these are labs where we invite people such as yourselves to come in and really actually have an opportunity to play with some of the technology and dive deep into what's happening in technology and trends in the future. So a project that we have going right now, and I don't know if anyone here has been to it, but we're having what we call creative clusters. And we just had one a few days ago around VR. We had about 53 people from Sydney, many of whom are actually working in VR already. And we had Mark Pesce, who you might know is a futurist and very well-known inventor himself, really talking to this small crowd saying, VR is going to move really quickly. So this is just a little tip for you. VR and blockchain technology are 2 areas, in the next 5 years, they're going to grow so fast. And VR is being used for health technology. There's a company in New Zealand who managed to make a VR movie that cancer patients can put on, and actually it's not their own body, but they visualize chemotherapy actually healing their body. So rather than distracting you from that kind of process, it's actually engaging your brain to watch the cells being changed and everything. And apparently that's actually been a groundbreaker, what these young, I think they're 25-year-olds, have come up with. So VR is not just about entertainment. It's also really big in the documentary area. And I really suggest, Vince, you get a VR department happening here if you don't already.
We already have.
Yep, it's awesome. Okay, so basically the challenges we all face in the years to come are a new breed. They're open, they're complex, they're dynamic, and they're networked. And you need to be able to use your creative intelligence, use some of the methodologies I've discussed to actually innovate and grow your businesses. And I just hope that you use your creative intelligence to make a better world. And that's it. Thank you.